Len John, Deputy Director for Investigations at IPID in KZN, has now concluded his testimony. He started off by describing just how the tow truck industry has essentially free reign in the police. And of course, those 300 cases of alleged extrajudicial killings that they were investigating between April 2023 and May 2026. Just how crucial was the testimony today, Tebekile, and perhaps just unpack some of those salient points.
Well, Nachi, good afternoon. As you say, Len John is a deputy director with the investigating directorate that looks into the conduct of police. That is IPID in KwaZulu-Natal. His testimony, you asked about its significance. This is key because we're basically looking at a new strand, a fresh strand, if you will, in terms of the work that the MADLANGA Commission of Inquiry has been doing since it was established by President Cyril Ramaphosa last year. This is the first time where we've heard detail about these alleged turf wars between tow truck companies that also appear to be, at least on his evidence, some sort of criminal enterprise, and that this rivalry that even escalates, again, allegedly to the point of murder. We've heard about these schemes where even a police couple basically benefited, allegedly, according to Len John, to more than 2 million rand, to the tune of more than 2 million rand in this broader scheme that he'd come to tell the commission about. He also spoke about scenes where he believes were staged by police who had killed suspects in situations that were presented by the SAPS, or at least members of a task team, as shootouts. But he seems to suggest that, in fact, what would have happened there is that these are suspects or people who would have been shot by police without necessarily having been in a confrontation that would have warranted police to respond with fire. Let's bring in SABC News senior reporter Kenny Mapanga, who's with me here outside the Bridget Mabandla Justice College. Kenny, I tried very much to sum up some of what we've heard, but as I was saying to Nati, this is a new strand for the Commission. Just how revealing has it been?
Well, absolutely. Good afternoon to you, Temile, and to the viewers at home. So extrajudicial killings on its own doesn't meet the terms of reference of the MADLANGA Commission. It's the patterns and the risk that Mr. John sought to highlight through the cases that he has actually worked on, particularly that of Bevan Loftus. And in terms of that particular matter, he says that there's a heightened risk in the KwaZulu-Natal province of an alleged infiltration coming into these task teams and allegedly getting them to act on their behalf or commit alleged criminal acts under the guise of legitimate operations on their behalf. And the case of Bevan Loftus is one which he highlights as such a case because that's where he testifies that allegedly Bevan Loftus, who is alleged to be a rival gang leader and tow and truck gang, that's how he describes it, there was allegedly a hit ordered out on him for 2.5 million. And the person that allegedly received that is Lieutenant Colonel Dina Govender of the KZN SAPS, who this particular CIT task team reports to, so it's under his command. And how he chooses to substantiate that claim is he looks at transactions during a specific period, which also include the April 2023 period in which Bevan Loftus was killed, to state that there were a number of transactions to Lieutenant Colonel Govender and his wife that do not meet the salary, let's say, that he was getting, or the kind of expenses and purchases that he was making. So that's the risk that he highlights to that particular evidence. And of course, he states that the manner in which Bevan Loftus was allegedly killed is consistent with the patterns or themes or characteristics of extrajudicial killings, because he highlights that it usually takes place where they will use any existing dockets about you or any suspicion about you in order to pounce, but it's not for the purposes of a legitimate arrest. But seemingly what is taking place is that the intention is to kill the suspect, and that's what he alleges before the probe. And he states that because of the bizarre circumstances upon which these suspects are killed, it becomes quite obvious that you're now in the realm of alleged extrajudicial killing. In the case of Bevan Loftus, he states that how that took place is that they alleged, which is the common reason that you see in terms of these extrajudicial killings, rather, that the suspects opened fire, and that's why they had to return. But in this instance, it seems that the same claim was used, but he raises questions about the credibility of this claim, stating that none of them had any injuries that were consistent with suspects opening fire on them. And on top of that, you see that a lot of these suspects are outnumbered, and the scenes of the firearms found on the scene don't actually match the claim.
Right.
So we're now in a different realm that deals with extrajudicial killings, but of course now deals with the possible risk of an infiltration of that kind in the different task teams, specifically in the KZN province.
And we possibly have the worst day to be standing outside the commission, because Canny and I are fighting against the wind as we talk about today's hearing. My jacket is flapping, Canny's hair also on a struggle of its own. But back to the serious stuff, Canny. So is it that these alleged extrajudicial killings and corruption, in essence, where police officers are allegedly paid by criminal elements, is it limited to just one task team?
No, there are multiple task teams. He actually highlighted three, in which where he states that there's patterns that emerge, that I think it's cash and transits, the truck and towing and drug alleged theme. And he states that because of the patterns that emerge in the manner in which these suspects were allegedly killed or died at the hands of police, allegedly, it points to extrajudicial killings. The case of Bevan Loftus, I think why he highlights that one, because he says that this is a prime example of the kind of risk of an infiltration, because it directly deals with alleged cartels, because that's what we place the term gang in. It's about alleged syndicates being able to use SAPS members to further their own interests. And in that particular case, it is alleged that a rival had wanted him killed and had paid for such to take place. Right. And under the command of a legitimate operation, so Men in Blue, they were able to allegedly achieve that. So that is what's being alleged in this particular evidence, and that is why John states that this is quite relevant to the work of the MADLANGA Commission and should be considered in that regard.
So does then this apparent or alleged criminal enterprise, do we know how far up it goes? Let me ask it that way. How far up does it go in the police service?
Well, the Lieutenant Colonel Dina Govender, as I understand it, is quite a high-ranking officer. To be the lead of or the command of a task team would mean that you would have that kind of sufficient experience, or you would be ranking high enough to do so. So essentially what he is stating is that you have these task teams that are designed to fight specific issues that become a problem within the criminal space, and what become a problem within the criminal space. And what effectively you're seeing that do is that instead of engaging with those types of crimes or fighting legitimate operations, you end up seeing these particular officers being brought into alleged criminal disputes or rivalries in terms of alleged criminal conduct. And in terms of these two leaders, that is, one is alleged to be Calvin Naika and the other is Bevan Loftus. It's alleged that Bevan Loftus was the alleged rival, and they used open case dockets against him to pounce on him, but not for the purposes of an arrest, but allegedly to basically, I think the term he used, that is John, was to execute him. So that's the pattern that he's now highlighting before the probe, stating that that risk now exists and it's imminent before the KZN province, and is obviously seeking the Commission's intervention in that regard.
I quickly want to ask you about what we expect will be corroboration, perhaps, of this evidence presented by Len John today, but also do we understand that these are syndicates in the police service or within the task teams that are still operating, carrying out these crimes?
Well, the syndicate is the alleged gang leaders or those operating in some kind of alleged criminal cartel, which has its own elements, but often is intertwined with alleged illicit substances such as drugs. And in this instance, it's about allegedly infiltrating the South African police services in order to serve your interests. So it would have been in the interest of a rival gang leader, if it is true, to allegedly wipe out your opponent. But how it was done here is that they used a legitimate task team under the guise of what could have been seen as legitimate operations. But what really takes place is that you see that the suspect is basically allegedly gunned down without any purpose of actually giving an arrest or giving effect to an arrest, but rather to settle that particular task that you've been given. So that's really what's being highlighted here, and it engages the Commission's terms of reference in that particular space. space, not so much about the rivals and the gangs or any of that. It's about using legitimate resources, police resources, and abusing that to further interests of alleged criminal cartels.
SABC News senior reporter Kenny Mapanga with me here at the Bridget Mabanda Justice College at the end of another day of evidence testimony on issues related to these tow truck companies, alleged criminal syndicates, police officers allegedly being used as hired guns, in essence, for gangs operating predominantly in KwaZulu-Natal. We will resume with more evidence from the MADLANGA Commission at 9:30.